For $5 a month, you can actually see the Thin Green Line interviews and other video content on patreon.com. Just search the Thin Green Line podcast on patreon.com. That's patreon.com, and feel like you're part of the conversation. Join us.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of The Thin Green Line. Join me, John Norris, and my host, Wayne Saunders, as we welcome Jack Carr, retired Navy SEAL sniper, best-selling author of The Terminal List, True Believer, and his brand new book, Savage Son, and worldwide conservationist, on the podcast today. Enjoy this one. It was a great 2.5 hours of conversation, and hit us up with questions and comments after you've had a listen. Welcome, everybody, to the Thin Green Line podcast. My co-host, Wayne Saunders, and I have the honor of having Jack Carr with us today. Those of you that don't know, and I'm sure you mostly do, because wonderful things are happening for Jack right now. He's a former Navy SEAL sniper, and the best-selling author of the book series Terminal List, True Believer, and now on the New York Times bestseller list, Savage Son, his latest book. Jack, we are so excited to have you here. You and I have shared a lot of co-author stuff and gotten to know each other over the last year especially, and we're really glad to have you. And so much is going on, man. How are things going for you right now? And give us a quick overview.
Yeah, so it's been a crazy, I say crazy couple of weeks, but it's really been a crazy few years to include the last year of transition out of the military into the private sector, moving from San Diego to Park City, Utah, just to get out of California and kind of make a physical and psychological break with the military, getting the book picked up by Simon & Schuster, writing the second one, then publishing the first one, figuring out that, this is more than just writing. There's a whole business side to this that I didn't anticipate at the outset. I thought you just wrote in a cabin up in the mountains and then you sent something off to New York and then you worked on the next one. Like, that's what I thought writing was. That was just my view of it growing up, knowing that I wanted to do this at some point. But keeping my energies, efforts focused on being the best operator I could be in the teams. So it was a little bit of a shock, but just like anything else, when you're shocked by something or you're surprised by something, you adapt quickly, just like you would on the battlefield. So I quickly realized that this is more than just writing. It's everything that you would do if you were starting a coffee shop or anything, photography studio, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's all the marketing, all the branding, all the co-branding, all the social media, all the interviews, budgets, everything else that you'd have to do in any other startup or business, you also have to do as an author. And I don't think many people realize that. So that keeps you busy. So I went all in on this, and which I don't know how you could do anything else, but I know a lot of people have to have a job on the side, and they're writing on the side, and they're trying to find an agent, they're trying to find a publisher. I was fortunate that I could dive 100% into this, and I could write, and I could look at the business landscape and try to incorporate some best practices from other groups like Black Rifle Coffee. I saw those guys get out and saw what they did and how they kind of leveraged the new media to build their brand and build their company, establish customers essentially. And I'm building a readership. And so I want people to buy the next book and the next book, that sort of thing. So it's been crazy, but especially with COVID-19, we weren't, that wasn't really on the radar. I mean, I was researching infectious diseases for my fourth book and the weaponization of infectious diseases when this hit. So I was hypersensitive to it, a little, maybe more so than I would have been otherwise. And so when this hit, immediately I was like, okay, there's going to be no book tour, but the publisher still thought there would be for a while. And then it was really early March when the publisher was like, or mid-March almost, when they're like, okay, there's not going to be a book tour. And luckily I'd been thinking about how to adapt ahead of time. So I had about a month where I was thinking, okay, if there's no book tour, how am I going to do this? Because mine will be the first kind of big thriller that comes out during this crisis. And how do you launch a book or a product in an appropriate way when there's so many people out there that are suffering? So pivoted, adapted, and leveraged that new media. Some of the companies that I've been involved with for the past few years, or well, more than a few years, jumped on board to help just because of those personal relationships with people like SIG and Aimpoint and Black Rifle Coffee and PSC Archery and Winkler Knives and places like that, to kind of help bring their audience into it and raise some awareness and do some giveaways. So anyway, I just pivoted and tried to adapt just like we would on the battlefield. Just the enemy's adapting to us all the time. We're always adapting to the enemy. We're looking for those emerging opportunities, trying to capitalize on momentum, looking for gaps, that sort of thing. So I just kind of transferred that over to this side of the house, realizing that if I screw up here, the repercussions of that are far less dire than they were in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that was a very long way of saying it's been a busy few months and years.
Sounds like you're keeping up with it just fine, though.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, it's we have 3 little kiddos out there that are just on the other side of these doors, and it looks all nice here with this background, but out there it's chaos. I'll tell you. And it's like as soon as these doors close, they're magnets. They're magnets for kids, magnets for my wife, magnets for dog, whatever else. So it's very hard to get anything done here while you're juggling all that. But it's also an experience we'll all remember for forever. Being in isolation here and trying to raise the kids and get through that schoolwork and not drive each other insane.
Yeah, no doubt. The things, like John told you, Jack, I've been reading, drinking, listening to podcasts for the last 2 days about you, trying to wrap my head around this interview. And just your roots to the outdoor is just, it impresses me. And the whole time I'm thinking, if he wasn't a SEAL, he would have been a warden. So
yeah. I told John that many times that that's the path I would have taken. And actually, for our daughter, who's 14, I talked to her a lot about John and what I've learned about his background and what you guys do. Her favorite show was Wardens. I don't think she'll admit it now because now she's a teenager. But her favorite show was Wardens on the Outdoor Channel for years when we lived in San Diego. And she was just naturally drawn to the outdoors and drawn to hunting at a very early age without me pushing her that direction. She just wanted to get out there and she wanted to hunt. So she got her first deer age 7 out in Texas, and her first elk at 10. Man. So now she has 2 amazing elk, one New Mexico, one Colorado. She's probably got about 20 whitetail. And what else? Yeah, some ducks, of course. And we went to Africa this summer. Our little guy, our 9-year-old, got his first animal out in Africa. So they got to see how absolutely nothing is wasted out there because they can't. Awesome. Like we think here, like, oh, we're taking this neck meat, we're getting this stuff out of the ribs. Oh, we're really doing it. No, well, in Africa, every single thing is utilized because they have to. So it was really cool for them to see that. Yeah. So as long as they keep appreciating this sort of thing, we try to get out there at least a couple times a year, and now they realize now I see why we have these freezers. And they realize, oh, wow, look I provided this for the family. We talk about it. We were doing that before, but now with COVID-19, it seems to really be hitting home because they see the news, even if we try to shield them from some of it, they see the news, they see people talking about, is there a supply chain shortage with food, or what are you going to do if we can't get water, whatever it is that they're hearing on the news. And then they see us having been prepared, and they see themselves having been a part of that by filling those freezers with whitetail, with elk. They see a moose I got last year. We're just finishing up now. So they see, oh, wow, we're a little more self-reliant than some of our friends or than the people we're seeing on the news. And hopefully, whether it's subliminal or it's more conscious or whatever, they're realizing that it's important to be self-reliant, self-sufficient, or as much as we can be. That makes us better citizens, stronger families, stronger communities. So this is a really impactful time for them. And I think as hunters, it's an opportunity for us to be able to talk to people that might not necessarily have been open to hunting before, or were against it, or might have not even thought about it because they're just so busy in their daily lives. But for them to be sitting at home and realizing that, oh, what if the grocery store all of a sudden just ran out of food? What am I going to do? Or what if I turn this tap water on and it comes out and it's brown for whatever reason, or it smells, or what if there's a fire in the house and there's no fire department they can get out here? I think, or what if my kid slices their finger, and do I want to go in for 2 stitches into down to the hospital that's filled with COVID-19 patients, or whatever it is? But it's just kind of more of an awakening, I think, for people when it comes to self-reliance and things that they can do to not be paranoid and not be it's not be crazy hoarder. And there's a difference between being prepared, having a level of preparedness that you are comfortable with as a citizen, and it doesn't mean that you're paranoid or what it does is it allows you to focus bandwidth where it needs to be when something like this happens, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a terrorist attack, whether it's a cyber type attack, or a combination. of those things. Instead of worrying about food, water, fire, those basics, you know what? You can focus your bandwidth where it needs to be to adapt to that situation. So in this situation, that's adapting businesses, and it's adapting as families to homeschool kids while you're running a business from your house for a lot of people. So anyway, right. It's just a good time for people to take a breath and kind of take stock of where they are as far as what they're prepared for.
Is there anything you've learned through this, Jack, this experience that you're going to, maybe next time, maybe have some masks available, or is there something that you didn't have that you think in the future you will?
I do have a list that's over there out of camera where it's chaos over there. So I took some notes those first couple of weeks of things that I would have wanted to change. And we did have masks, and my wife was like, nice. Oh, okay. And they were the N95 masks. So I had those. We were pretty well prepared, probably more so than a lot of people I would guess. Yeah. But I did take some notes. Communication side of the house. I've always wanted to figure out the ham radio side of things. Just curious about that. And so I've never delved into that. Don't know it. Our vehicles could be a little better set up. Like mine is pretty good, but I've been I've been super busy, focused solely on writing and building this up. So having those vehicles set up the way that I want them to be set up, we're not quite there yet. So I took some notes there, but I think those were the two big ones. Everything else, water, kids trying out the fire extinguisher so they know what they're doing. So the first time that something happens, it's not when there's a fire. We've been out to Thunder Ranch in Oregon, training as a family together, or at least my little guy shot, but our 14-year-old, she's running weapons, my wife, me. So we've done that stuff before. So the family really knows, we're as prepared as we can be, I think, on that front. But yeah, those sorts of things. But the main ones for us, I have to go back and look at my notes in that corner, but they were the radio, the communication piece, and making sure that those vehicles are set up.
Yeah, and that's awesome preparation, Jack. And you mentioned adaptability, and you hit it on the head with what happened in COVID-19. And I know you posted on this, and so did I recently, and a lot of other fellow conservationists, whether we have a special operations background or not, on this booming number of license sales and more hunters jumping out that may have not been conservationists before because folks were experiencing the COVID-19. And, adaptability is always based largely on some sort of crisis or some sort of challenge. But Wayne and I always talk about the positives that come out of any crisis like COVID-19 or any other disaster, whatever it may be. And just to see so many people realizing I might have to fend more for myself a little bit, I might have to learn to process meat, keep that freezer full when the supply chain stops. So it's interesting to see this development in the country, kind of going back to what we all hold near and dear, the three of us and many more on the conservation side. And, when you sent me that copy, the proof copy of Savage Son to do the review on, first of all, thanks for that, because it was an amazing read. And like you as a fellow author, we're both struggling to find time to read other people's stuff, but yours is always at the top of the list, man, since we connected. But besides of all the special operations background you did to defend this country and fight for what we all believe in, the conservation element in Savage Son, especially the hunting element, the archery element, the spirit of the wild, that's what really grabbed me in this book. All three are awesome, don't get me wrong, but I can see just where Savage Son gets even more into that, man. So tell us about your background as a hunter. When did you start hunting? Was it traditional, like for Wayne and I came down, from our fathers or grandfathers? Did you know game wardens, or was it just an outdoor lifestyle that led you, one, to become a conservationist and such a passionate one, and then go into the SEAL teams as well?
Yeah. So there's so much to unpack and talk about there. But from an early age, I was just drawn to the outdoors. I knew I would serve my country in uniform. I think that's because my grandfather was killed in World War II. He was killed off Okinawa, 1945. Yeah. So I grew up with the silk maps they gave aviators back then. He was a Marine pilot, flew the Corsair. I picked black and white pictures of him and his squadron, his medals, his wings, that sort of thing. So it was just never a question that I was going to go in the military. And then I also knew, because I was studying at a very early age, special operations, military, that a lot of what I was learning came from the pages of fictional thrillers by guys like Tom Clancy, Nelson DeMille, David Morrell, AJ Quinnell, JC Pollock, Mark Olden, all these guys in the 80s whose protagonists had backgrounds that I wanted to have one day. And typically their protagonists had Vietnam experience, and either it was usually Army Special Forces. There were a couple SEALs in there though as well, or CIA paramilitary operations in Vietnam, and then moving into the Cold War or terrorism, combination of those two things. So I knew that I was going to write one day as well, but I've always been drawn to the outdoors. And my family didn't hunt for whatever reason, but we went to the range. So we shot. My dad had his old 30 pre-64 30-30, that we had, and his old 22, like pump action 22 Winchester, or Remington, and this little Colt Woodsman 22. So we'd go to the range and we'd shoot. And I always wanted to hunt. And I was so jealous of the kids whose dads took them out hunting. But we just didn't, for, we were just busy, I guess. But we did go to the range, and we backpacked all through the Sierras, and we had cabins up there and that sort of thing. So we were always outdoors, always hiking, backpacking at a very early age. And so I wanted to be self-sufficient out there. I wanted to learn how to survive out there. So I was reading all these survival manuals, and at camp, I remember they had this Army Special Forces guy with a Vietnam background that taught a survival class. And I was just enamored with this guy, and it was amazing. We learned how to make a fire with one match. You had one match, which at the time I thought that was easy because I'd seen my dad make fires all the time. I didn't realize he was like, making these fires. And so it was really cool to build your own fire and have your one match. And then later, it wouldn't be till, I don't know how many years later, 10 years after that I made my first one with a bow drill at the Boulder Outdoor Survival School here in Utah, actually, before I went into the military. So I've just always been drawn to that. But getting into hunting without someone, a mentor or someone to take you down that path, it just, as a kid especially, you're just like, you just don't know.
Right.
So my first real hunt, the first one that I think I'd been out on a bird hunt or two or something before, but what I really look at as my first hunt is a sniper sustainment trip in the fall of 2000, up to a place in Washington State that I won't name because I don't know if they like the association with special operations that they continue to have to this day. But it was pre-September 11th. And so the sniper cell that was recently stood up on the West Coast, they wanted guys to put a bullet into something that was living and breathing before we did it for real. And this is really like Vietnam era type tactics for my sniper school, which I went through in summer of 2000. And then the sniper sustainment trip up to Washington State, it was incredible. I mean, it was a beautiful place, right? Kind of on the Canadian border up there. And I got my first deer up there, and
nice.
It was such an amazing experience. And then we're hanging the meat in a tree, and it's kind of aging it up there because it's so cold at that time of the year, and just slicing pieces off and just searing it on the grill and eating. It was just I wanted to do it my whole life, and I had to wait for whatever reason because I got busy with going into the military, going to boot camp, going to buds, going to my first platoon, proving yourself in that first platoon, going to all these schools you need to go to get these different requisite skills like free fall and all these other things. So you're just solely focused on that. And like for me, I didn't really have any extracurricular activities other than reading about warfare, insurgencies, counterinsurgencies, terrorism. But that was my focus. So being able to go up there and do that was absolutely amazing. I was already hooked beforehand just by that innate desire to be self-sufficient and learn these things. But that was really my first hunt. And then really, not long after was September 11th. So September 11th hits, and then we started to do the things that we thought we were going to do when we showed up at our first SEAL teams. When we first showed up, we thought that we were going to get the pagers, and we were going to get all this amazing gear, and the pagers were going to go off, and we're going to go off and do the Save the Princess op, and then come back and have beers. And that wasn't really how it was. You got to your first team. They handed you a mop or a paintbrush or changed that light bulb, cleaned the bathroom, whatever it was, new guy stuff. And it wasn't until after September 11th that we really got to do the job we thought we would do when we came in. So point being, we got very busy with that. And there are a lot of parallels now that I look back and take a breath on hunting animals and hunting humans. With that pattern of life, people put game cameras out on trails and try to figure out, when that buck's coming by that they're after or whatever it is. We're doing the same thing downrange. You're establishing that pattern of life. And so there are a lot of similarities. The weapons that are used to hunt throughout history are similar to the ones that are used to defend the tribe from the beginning of time up until today. So there are all these parallels. But it was really when I got back, I think it was actually before that last Iraq deployment, I got to do another sniper sustainment trip out to Santa Catalina Island, and nice. A hunt out there. And it was beautiful, amazing. They were through a what is it? The Catalina Conservancy, I think it's called. They run and manage the animals out there. So we took the snipers out there, and we stayed at an old Boy Scout camp in these tents, and just what a beautiful place to hunt. It was amazing. It brought that venison back, and it was just incredible. But then when I got back after that next deployment, realized I wasn't going to be taking guys downrange anymore. I was a troop commander at that point. So that was the last time I tactically maneuver guys on the battlefield. After that, I'd make the next rank. And yeah, you're still a leader, but essentially you're back in that tactical operations center. You're not kicking indoors. You're not tactically maneuvering guys on the battlefield. So it's different. And it was very evident to me that it was time to get out and take care of my family. My family needed me. We have a special needs middle child that needs 24/7 full-time care. My wife had been dealing with all of that and the two other kids throughout all that time in the military, all those deployments, all the workups that go along with those deployments when you're away for a month here and a month there. So it was evident to me that it is now time to get out, to switch gears, take care of my family, and to start writing. So that's when that happened. And then I started really hunting because at that same time, my daughter expressed an interest in it. So we went all in as a family. And we've been very fortunate to have hunted, well, a lot of different places as a family. And of course you put down the iPad, you put down the iPhones, and you're out there in that tree stand or that hide or whatever it is, and you're just together. So it's a special thing to do as a family. And then of course, like we're doing now, we relive it when we cook up our meals at night and talk about who got this and where and the whole experience. So very fortunate to have gone all in. And then as part of that, to circle it back to your question, I wanted also to educate people on conservation through the medium of a political thriller. So it was very important to me to try to do that because as we have anti-hunting groups out there, obviously, that are getting in and getting to kids at a very early age through all sorts of different mediums these days. And so it's just one of the most natural things you can do is provide food for your family, provide food for your tribe, provide food for your community, and then defend those same people. You defend that gift of life, not just yours, but your families and your communities and your countries. So those things are just so tied together for me that I wanted to tie them together in the novels. So all three of them have a little bit of conservation woven in there. The second one is specific to Africa, and I went over there to Mozambique to do research, and went to South Africa to help train up an anti-poaching unit down there that are helping to defend and protect some of the last rhino on Earth. And so I got to weave some of that tracking that I learned from them into the storyline of both book 2 and 3. But I wanted the people that grab it off the shelf, that think they're grabbing a spy novel, a spy thriller, a political thriller off the shelf, to also, whether it's subliminal or not, whether they recognize it or not, to get a little bit of an education in conservation. So the second one is heavy on that, True Believer, and then the third one, Savage Son, is as well. So it's I don't think there are too many books out there of popular fiction that take it or touch on it to the level that I do, or that weave it into the storyline like I have. So that was important for me to do, and I think it'll be something that I continue to naturally weave into everything else, but the other books, because it's just something that's so personal to me. It would be strange not to weave those things in. Just like it'd be strange if I said, he pulled out a knife. Well, I need to know what kind of knife that is, because it tells me a lot about the person using it. All of the weapons and the gear that I use. Right. The characters. It's not something I just Googled and Google like Navy SEAL knife or something, and something pops up and I write it down. No, there are things that I know, that I've used, that I trust, or there are things that I have another character, maybe an antagonist, or maybe or somebody that doesn't really know what they're doing, and I need to show that they don't know what they're doing because of what they're wearing, how they're wearing it, what they're using, how they're using it. So sure. I use all those things as character development tools as well.
Yeah, no, I think your books are really American because it's almost like a frontiersman, that type of mentality, that, tied to the earth type of thing, and incorporates it into your books. So I think it's very, for somebody who lives in the woods, it's very, I gravitate right to it. It's very, very interesting. And when you talk about your bear stuff, I think about, when you talk about your hunting, I think about your adventure in Russia with that brown bear, because that stood out in my mind as I listened to that. And what stood out in my mind is that rusty old gun that they handed you, Jack.
Oh yeah,
I put my
crazy.
put my feet in your shoes, and I'm like, oh my.
It was crazy. It was crazy. And I forget exactly like when someone told me that it was made in an AK factory. It's possible they told me afterward and I've just kind of like superimposed it to beforehand, but I'm not sure. But anyway, somehow I knew that it was made in an AK factory. It made me feel much better about it, having used those weapons and having faced them on the battlefield as well. So yeah, he handed me this, he handed it to me in 3 parts. When I told it on the Joe Rogan podcast, I made it seem like he just handed me this. He handed me 3 parts to this thing. And so I put it together right there in the boat that we were in, kind of scraping along. And then he hands me those 2 shells, and it was like in Road Warrior. Remember that at the end where he has his double barrel shotgun thing is side by side that's sawed off, and one of them goes. I was picturing that happening because I mean the boat's wet. It's just the thing's rusty. I'm like, I got these 4 slugs, and I loaded up the 2, and luckily I trained at FTW Ranch for my Cape Buffalo hunt in Mozambique, and it just felt kind of like that Krieghoff that I used, and I hunted my Cape Buffalo with no optic. I wanted that hunt to be super old school, just the way you would have done it 100 years ago.
Right.
But at FTW, man, we went through the paces with those things. They have animals that are coming in on tracks and stuff like that are charging you, and you gotta reload and get back up, and it's just great training. So it felt similar to that. So I had the 2 shells in my hand, and then the 2 in the shotgun.
And then he's going to go drive it towards you.
That was crazy.
That
was a little dicey. I was like, oh okay. I mean, I guess let's do this. Let's keep going. And but yeah, I mean, I went around the other side of this bush because we could see the bush. We heard the death bellow a little later, but before we heard that, I went around to the other side of this bush, and I could see the grass where it was we were still breathing in there. I could see the grass moving. It was really tall and thick, and I just got down there, and then I got down on my knee, just thinking that, okay, if he comes at me on all floors, I'm going to try to get these 2 rounds off here, get these 2 slugs in him. And then it's immediate action drill from there. Like, I don't know. I'll adapt quickly. I'm going to get that thing loaded again, of course, regardless of what happens. Even if he drops right away, I'm still loading that thing and putting a couple more in. But it didn't happen that way. He heard that death bellow. We waited a little while longer just to be safe, and then went in, and the thing was massive.
Phenomenal.
Massive. But what surprised me about that, and for you guys, I don't know if it would surprise you or not, but I didn't put much thought into it before I got over there, was just how it was just like almost hunting in the US, and how it was all science-based.
Very similar.
And I don't think it probably wasn't like that when the country opened up in the early 90s. I'm guessing it was a little more Wild Westy when it first opened up for hunters over there after the fall of the Soviet Union. Maybe if you had a permit or somehow got in there while it was still the Soviet Union in the 80s. I'm not sure if anybody did that or not, but it was surprisingly similar to how it is to hunt in the United States. And there was no leeway on that at all. And I was very curious about that, if there would be. And there was not. It was very, hey, this is your tag, and this is your animal, and this is how we do things here, and this is how many we can take out of this area, and how many we need to take out of this area based on the biology and all in the science. So that part impressed me. That stood out in my mind. And I guess I didn't study it ahead of time, but that's how it was. So I'm not sure if you guys have heard that before or have heard the opposite, but for the area that I was in, it was just like I was hunting in the US as far as the law is concerned.
Yeah. And the sustainability of that population just benefits them in the long run. So I'm sure that's the smart thing to do. And rather than kill them all at once and then say, geez, we had a resource that we just let go, which thank God that they're doing that for sure. And your travel to it, that was pretty interesting too, just that you went through Way of Alaska too, because I guess my mind doesn't wrap around that. And all of a sudden you connected it. I'm like, well, that's thinking close. Yeah, you're right. And what a way to do it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
the only way.
I mean, it's like an hour and 45-minute flight or a 2-hour flight, whatever that was from Anchorage. It was close. And of course I incorporated all that into the 3rd novel, into Savage Sun. But there's only 1 month a year that you can fly out of Alaska, only for August. And it's like every Sunday there'll be 1 flight. So there, turn around, come back. That's it. So you have to plan your trip. It was 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, so you have to plan your trip in week blocks. Otherwise you're flying from Kamchatka Peninsula to probably Moscow, then from Moscow to Germany or Great Britain or whatever,
all the way around,
home to New York, and then all the way back to Utah.
Yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah, that's essentially it's all the way around the world if you're doing that way. But there's some hunts, I think moose or some of the goats they have over there that you can only do, I think, later in the year, maybe September, October timeframe, early November, which would be really cool just because it's getting cold and it's getting to be that Siberia that we think of, having grown up in the 80s. It's getting into more of that, but you have to be prepared for some serious travel to get there, and then taking your rifle, if you're using your own, through all those different countries to include this one. I mean, who knows? You get diverted somewhere in New York, New Jersey, and then you gotta like go to a hotel, and next thing you know, you're in jail. So it's it's crazy. You got to take all that into account, and use probably some sort of a firearms broker to look at all those different laws and make sure that you're all set to get your firearm in and out of Russia and the countries you need to go to on the way to and from. So that was it. That I think it's going for me at this stage, going to those locations that are almost like characters in the novel. I had to put boots on the ground there. So I went up to Whitefish, and I spent some time with Andy Stump up there, who, John, I know you know. And so I did that. We have some friends up there from California, that bought a ranch in that same area. With such great people. So I did that, and then I knew I needed to go to Russia. I knew I needed to go to Kamchatka Peninsula, because I was going to have that as a character in the book, and then I was going to have Siberia woven in, and Kamchatka is just south of Siberia, kind of like I did with the second novel, going to Mozambique. And for that second one, for the first one, I'd been to Iraq, been to Afghanistan, lived in San Diego, knew LA, knew New York. But for that second one, I didn't know Mozambique specifically. I'd been to Africa a couple of times, both in and out of uniform, but I hadn't been to Mozambique specifically. So I needed to go there. And then for that second one, I needed to talk to people that had a background in man tracking, not just from here who had learned it from someone who had man tracking, but people who had grown up tracking animals, who had then caught the tail end of the bush wars in the mid 90s, who then got kind of co-opted by the National Police Force to turn into what we'd consider CSI. So taking those tracking skills and applying them to an urban environment and getting much more into the psychology of tracking and getting into the mind of your prey, and then kind of aging out of that, and then getting hired by some of these mostly private groups that are trying to preserve, protect, defend rhino on some of these private game reserves and preserves in South Africa. So for that second one, I'd also been to Morocco before I went to the military, and I had been to Ukraine, specifically to the catacombs under the caves under Odessa. And so I knew for this third one that I needed to go to Russia just to get that local flavor. And I found some amazing vehicles they have over there. I wouldn't have know that they had otherwise. Their snow machines over there. Their snow machines have one skid in the front, the ones I saw anyway, because when they're going through what they call the taiga, so that tundra, they're not looking at two skids to catch these roots. They just have the one that makes it easier.
Unidirectional,
yeah. So that was really interesting to see those, and they look like the bodies look like they're 1970 style snow machines, like snowmobiles, but they're new. But it's Russia. But if you look at Russian cars that are new, also you realize that now I get it. But it was important for me to go back there, and the other interesting part of that is that in Mozambique and in South Africa, people just wanted to tell me the stories of their country. They wanted to talk politics. They wanted to talk to me about the Chinese influence in mining, illegal and legal, the meat poaching that goes along with providing food for the people in the mines. They want to tell me the story of their country. Russia, totally different deal. I thought it was going to be the same, just because I'm like, research, novel, people want to talk, great. I'm moving at such a fast pace these days. But I didn't stop to think about it until I got there, and no one wanted to talk to me. And that's because for most of Russian history, if someone's asking you these types of questions that I'm asking for a political thriller, you weren't long for this earth. It was right to the firing squad of the Gulag. So it was a very different experience interviewing people in Russia than it was interviewing people in Africa. So open, so welcoming in Africa. Russia, super closed off, super skeptical of why I'm actually there. So it was a great experience.
Jack, to your point, you hit ahead there when you said the stuff in Africa, how open those folks are. I've been over to South Africa twice now, and our wildlife trafficking team from the game warden side, and then going over for a hunt as well with Kruger and everything going on there on the poaching. So all the True Believer Savage Son really resonated when we both read that book. But South Africa is so well managed, like you mentioned, other regions of the world as far as conservation goes. Every single ranch, almost overdoing it compared to what we even do out here in public land, management that we're constantly trying to balance and actually improve. But I wanted to run back to sniper training and when you deployed as a sniper, because we both had that background. And it sounds like when you guys went over and started your SEAL team sniper training, just like we do on the domestic, urban and rural law enforcement side, me coming from California like you in the Silicon Valley, we would get a lot of snipers in our schools that really good shots, but they were urban guys, dedicated, motivated, in shape, great skill sets, but didn't really have the search image for stalking and the field craft and man tracking and things like that. So we would do the same thing. We would go on the big ranches out of the Silicon Valley foothills and find a rancher that would work with us and get them into their first hog. Or we'd go shoot even ground squirrels with 308s, precision rifles at long range, small target, good things to do just so they could get into that. What influenced you to be a sniper? And I kind of know this because I know you, from the standpoint of our love for literature. And I think we had some of the same influences, but where did it all come from? And did you notice that in the teams, that those of you that already had a hunting background or were outdoorsmen, coming from rural mountainous areas versus coming from the city, when you guys were training your SEAL snipers, what'd you notice there?
Yep, I definitely noticed that the people who had hunting backgrounds, and it wasn't as many as I thought it was going to be. For whatever reason, I think it's more today because of that sniper sustainment training, because of going up to Washington State, because of going to Catalina. It's almost incorporated in. Whereas when I went through in 2000, it was Vietnam tactics, and it was like, here's, you're going to the school. It's 73 days. It's very high attrition. So it was a little different. But I wanted to be a sniper since I was a little kid. I mean, you're seeing it in movies. For me, I'm reading that Charles Henderson biography of Charles of Hathcock.
93 confirmed kills, man.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. So I'm reading that. I'm thinking it's fantastic. I'm seeing it in fiction. And then of course I read Stephen Hunter and Point of Impact in the early 90s before I go in. And of course that's the book that introduces the world of Bob Lee Swagger. They made the movie Shooter out of it later on. But there's always just something about the sniper that resonated with me, about being able to have a skill set where you can be, at the time you're reading about the 1 mile shot, now of course it's some crazy stuff going on out there, but growing up, you're reading about that 1 mile shot and you're thinking about that, and you're reading about these books and seeing what these guys did, and really reading about someone who's essentially alone, that's kind of bored of friendly lines, behind enemy lines as a sniper. Vietnam, he's got a spotter with him, so it's a couple guys out there. It's two, and you're out there doing the job, and you're laying in wait, you're hunting, and you're waiting for that. In that time, in those stories, Viet Cong type patrol to come by, or North Vietnamese army patrol to come by. And then you're waiting, you're seeing that first guy come, and you're not taking him out because he's the point man. And then you're seeing that second guy, and you're waiting to try to identify that high level leader, that general, that colonel, that major, whatever it is, whoever you have intel on that's going to be on that trail that day. Or maybe it's a target of opportunity. It's just a heavily used trail. And you're still doing that because you take that one point man out, and you got some 17-year-old kid. But what you really want, we really were out hunting for that day, is that person that is command and control of that element. And can have more of an impact on the battlefield in that particular scenario. So that was always just resonated with me. So I knew that I was going to go down that path and become a sniper. So it was just one of those things. It wasn't even a question.
Yeah, for us, it was a little different because going the law enforcement side and being game wardens, traditionally game wardens aren't snipers, or they don't have it on the team. But some of the mutual background, and it was Stephen Hunter, and it was that Charles Henderson book. It not in that order, reverse those. But I know Stephen Hunter well, and it's awesome that he's endorsed your books. You've toured together, and I saw a lot of influences in the style of writing. Mm-hmm. Very, the depth of everything was right there with Stephen Hunter as one of the all-time best. And it was literally Time to Hunt that changed my decision that if we ever needed a sniper element, we were going to do it. And we were developing sniper training, embedding in sniper training, becoming instructors in sniper training around 2000, the same time you were, knowing that we would need it in an agency sometime domestically, even as conservation officers, because of the force multiplier issue and everything we've seen from a domestic terrorism threat, you name it, an active shooter, and then the cartel marijuana thing. But it was the books, and it was the hunter in all of us, that really kind of gravitated toward that. And I know that's where it came from for you, as you said so many times, and probably some of your colleagues as well. pretty cool stuff.
Oh yeah. I think Stephen Hunter and the Bob Lee Swigert character, those stories, of course, the movie that hits even more people, really, I mean, that's the power of popular fiction. And I think the left, for lack of a better term, realized that very early on. And when I say early on, I mean in the 60s. And it realized what they can leverage to get the political outcome that they want. Or they work it back. They do essentially what the enemy does. What political outcome do we want, and how do we work our way back from there?
Yeah.
So they've been quite they've been smart about that, and we probably trained at some of the same places. Now our sniper school is in Indiana. Now they fly people. We used to have two sniper schools, one for the East Coast SEALs, one for the West Coast SEALs. Right. I went to the West Coast one. Now everybody goes to the same one together. So all the curriculum is standard across the community, which is probably a smart way to go. But we were in Central Valley, California, and Kalinga, California, that range that they have out there, that crazy range.
That's where we started too, brother.
Really nice.
M14 program in the middle of
we had
August,
the M14 too. That's what we started with. And then we switched over to bolt action Remington 700 custom shop with their not even 7.62 but 308, and then went to the 300 Win Mag built by was it Remington 700 Action with the Macmillan stock put together by our armors at Crane, and then we had the same kind of setup but with a 50 cal, same type of deal out there. And then once we got to our teams, then we got the SR-25 for what we called the Mark 11, and then a little later the Mark 12. So the 5.56 auto loading weapon system. So, but it was crazy out there, and we camped on the range. We just brought tents. Carr camped essentially on the range. I don't think they let you get away with that today. It would be against something just to have guys out there camping on some public range for 70 some days, going through this course. So, but it was great. We learned a ton out there, obviously. And then the stalking piece, guys were stalking out there. My class didn't. We went to Nyland, to more to the desert, but guys were getting the valley fever out there. I guess that dust particles and whatever would happen to them. So guys were getting really sick, stalking out there. So they switched that up and went elsewhere. But yeah, now it's out in Indiana, one sniper school for everybody. And I think, man, I can imagine how good these guys are today with all the lessons learned from the last almost 20 years at war, the technology that's gone along with that. And that'll be something that I explore also in my books, kind of like Stephen Hunter has done as well. But that technology versus kind of that old school, the art versus the science. And what you want, of course, is you want a blending and a melding of the two for the best guys out there. So if that PDA thing goes down and you don't know wind speed exactly, that's what you don't know the temperature exactly, all that sort of thing. You have the art, and you've done so much. You put so many rounds downrange with whatever weapon system that you're on, that it's a part of you and you can do the job, rather than, I can't do the job now because my battery ran out of my PDA thing. So there is definitely so there's that piece of it that I'm going to explore in future novels as well.
That's going to be awesome. And the difference between science versus all that applied, field craft that Bob Lee Swigert in the early days was so masterful at, and Carlos Hathcock, from the Charles Henderson side. But now we're seeing the same thing on our agency side, going from 308s to 6.5 Creedmoors, and I'm shooting a 300 PRC now and working with that.
That's my next on my list.
Oh, brother, we'll sidebar on that with that rifle I'm shooting that you've been seeing. It's truly amazing, and applied ballistics and the reticle systems now that weren't quite there, even 5 years ago. Yeah. And stalking's almost not needed when it always should be, because we can shoot out to 2,000 yards now and make hits. It's just ridiculous with what the science is doing. But we don't ever want to see that all go away. We want to see that balance, as you said. It's going to be interesting to see the development, and super cool to see it develop in your books and the stories.
Yeah, and I do check my stuff because, obviously, there's been I got out in 2016. Even before that, like my last year in, I wasn't doing anything other than trying to get out of the military, because it's a gigantic bureaucracy that you feel like you're the first person to ever try to navigate. And then before that, I finished up my time at a shore duty. So it was the last few years, in the military, I wasn't kicking doors with the guys. I was preparing to transition, really, because I made that shift in my mind, like it's time to get out. The first 16, 17 years was focused solely on doing that job, solely focused on the mission, the guys that I'm leading, because you have to be that way. But when I wasn't doing that and got back from Iraq my last time and looked around and decided to get out, then it was like, okay, time to move forward here and move on to this next chapter in life. So what I mean by that is that some of those details and some of the things that I was very good at back in the day, I might quite not remember the way I did when I was actually in there and people's lives depended on me, because that focus has shifted. So I do check all the sniper stuff. I send it out to the guys at FTW Ranch, those guys are awesome in Texas.
They're awesome.
They're just crushing it. And they see so many rifle scope combinations come through there. They know what works, know what doesn't, who's lost a little bit on quality control here and there, whatever, who was bought by, what scope company was bought by so-and-so or whatever. And then corporate made some decisions and now they're not quite as good or whatever it is. Like they keep tabs on all that stuff. So I send it out to those guys and I'm like, hey, if I'm at this position, at this elevation, at this temperature, I need to make this kind of shot. Is this right? And can you, it's like someone having a teacher check your work. So for those, because I know people are going to look, especially with my background, they're going to be like, no, this isn't right. You couldn't make that shot or whatever it is. Like I want the shots to be realistic shots that people can make, and ones that are really tough shots that I'm putting a lot of thought into. Well, I want those to be makeable as well, based off the weapon systems available, the scopes available, the shooter's experience, all that sort of thing. I want those to be real. So I have those guys check.
And that really comes across, man, because up until your stuff came out and I got to know you and we got to know your story, Stephen Hunter was kind of the gold standard on that, with his precision on gear and what the rifle does, what the caliber does, what the hand loading ballistics are, the chemistry. And being a lifelong hand loader and a precision rifle guy like you, like Wayne, like that we just love to do, I would never see that in other thriller books that are fictional. And then when Stephen Hunter did it, that's what blew my mind. It just absolutely took the small percentage of guys that are that crazy about it, maybe the gun nerds, if you will, all of us, taking it to the next level. And then when I started reading your books, I went, oh my gosh, I knew it was going to be technically accurate given your background as a SEAL and as a sniper, but going that extra depth and extra length is just incredible. And now people are seeing the new generation of thriller coming from you on the fictional side, and they're getting a taste of that accuracy, man. And it's really cool. Especially, when you and I are at SHOT Show and we're around colleagues that know this stuff backwards, forwards, and better than us, some of the guys we run with, and they say, hey man, this is really good. I really like how you did this. This was spot on. It wasn't embellished. It wasn't far-fetched. And we just haven't seen that. So I'm really enjoying that aspect of what you're doing. It's incredible.
Oh, I appreciate that. I give Stephen Hunter full credit for influencing me, just because, well, all those guys that I mentioned earlier, like those are all a part of me. Like we're all this, it's a conglomeration of all our experiences put together, and hopefully as we get older, we apply a little wisdom to that so we can make better decisions going forward. But those guys are my early professors in the art of storytelling. And I found them all so early in life because my mom was a librarian. I was surrounded by books. As you can see in the background here, I'm still surrounded by books, but I was surrounded by books from a very early age. I loved reading. I knew where I was going one day. So I was on that path. So I was essentially, even though I was enjoying reading these things, I was really studying. I was a student of the genre, just almost by default, very natural. It was a calling, much like the military was a calling, SEALs were a calling, sniper was a calling, writing in this genre, that's a calling as well. So Stephen Hunter, he did it masterfully, using weapons, firearms as characters. So I try to do the same thing. I try to give a little background. Like I reached out to the guys at CZ and I was like, hey, because just over the years I've developed relationships with these guys. And I was like, hey, if I want someone to pick up a used a rifle in South Africa or in Rhodesia in the early 70s, but I want it made like in the late 60s sometime. So it's used, but then it's become a part of this family story. Like where would that have been made? What was the exact model? There anything weird about the sights that changed? So and those guys, they know what they're doing. They got back to me. They know who to reach out to.
Right.
That's awesome. And they got me this whole history. I could written a whole book on the history that they gave me of a rifle that fit that description.
Wow.
So of course I weave that into the storyline as well. And so I do that with different weapon systems, because I just loved it when Stephen Hunter did it, and it just makes sense for me. I couldn't not do that. So that's super fun for me to do.
Yeah. For those guys that don't care, they read over it. And for those guys that do, they focus on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife's always like, do you really need to put this in there? I'm like, yes, I do.
Well, and Jack, to your point, exactly. I mean, it's a little easier on a nonfiction side on my side, because I can articulate exactly what we're using that agency will let me describe, or what ballistics, what weapon system, what capabilities we're doing, what we actually did on a mission. but I've actually gotten critiques sometimes like, well, maybe you could go a little less with the technical jargon of exactly what the weapon system is in the round and why you did this shot this way or did this move.
And you're
But,
like, you can
for
skip
those
over that part. You can skip that one sentence or two sentences or paragraph.
that resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I said, man. It's not that much. It's not that much.
Just skip over
it's
it.
very, very minor. Hardly negative. Yeah. And so your stuff is spot on. I just very little negative on that side on both sides of it, but I get that periodically.
Yeah. And for those that are detail orientated, it's there and they're right into it because you put it there.
Yep. And right, Wayne, we kind of need for the detail guys to get a little of that.
Absolutely, because we're not all cut from the same cloth.
Precise.
And it adds legitimacy as well, because anybody can just write rifle, anybody can just write knife or whatever, or say camouflage uniform or whatever. Right. But not many. When you put the added detail in there, that's not even a full sentence.
Yeah, but when they take the really safety off the Glock, that's the bad stuff.
Yeah, I know it's so difficult.
That's when you throw the book away. You're like, yeah, I'm not reading that.
So tough.
And you do talk about that because I don't like watching police shows. My family hates it because I'll walk away because I won't say it because everybody will get mad. But I don't like watching unreal stuff.
Yeah, I know, it's so hard. It's I took pictures. I helped on the pilot script for the Terminalist series that Chris Pratt's doing, and I advised on the pilot script, and now I'm going to advise on the next 8 or 10, however many long that is, because Chris wants it gritty, he wants it real, he wants it authentic, he doesn't want it Hollywood. So reining that in is a little difficult because you get a bunch of Hollywood people in one room, or the writer's room, and they come up with some amazing creative ideas that are totally unrealistic, not authentic at all. So my job is to make sure that it stays within the realm of possibility. It stays true to the gritty side of the story, which is fun for me. And I look at it as two distinct different projects. So I look at the book First Blood by David Morrell, written in 1972, that introduced the world to Rambo. And I look at the movie First Blood with Sylvester Stallone, two very different entities, almost different characters, but they're both fantastic. I love the book. I love the movie. I looked at it like that. I look at, this is going to change. I accept that this is going to change. I trust Chris Pratt with it, which is why I chose him. He chose and we agreed. But I trust him to do the best job with it he possibly can and keep it gritty. That's the connection to the storyline, the gritty authenticity, realism. But it's going to change because they're visually telling a story. It's not just taking what is written down and transferring it to a visual type medium. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to tell a story through pictures and through dialogue
and time frame.
And it's just exactly. And you have this condensed time frame. Luckily, with 8 to 10 series, you have more time, which is great for a book like this. But that realism has got to be there. So I feel very fortunate to be involved with that, and we're going to try to. I'm going to do everything I can to keep it as authentic as I possibly can, as far from a violent standpoint, and that sort of thing. So I think that's important to it.
Well, brother, it's such a good fit because Chris is a field to table conservationist, man. He's just a good guy all the way around, regardless of how big he is as an actor. So congratulations on that. And that's what we were going to ask you next. It was a great lead in. And then having you as a consultant, obviously, for your story, there should be no technical deficits of any magnitude, So that's going to be a lot of fun. But what's the time frame on that, if you can even talk about it at this point, and what, how different it is from just, like you said, book writing versus going into a script or something fictional. Big transition. How's that process going for you, and what can we look forward to?
Yeah, so it was really interesting to me because I'm a student of this, and this is my first experience with screenwriting and seeing how they put that together and how you tell a story visually and how you tell a story visually when someone's reading a script. So it's fascinating to me. So I learned a ton with that pilot script. I'll be able to apply that to these other scripts going forward. But I think now they're on the calendar. I think it's December to start filming. I'm not sure. Awesome. And so maybe coming out in 2021 at some point would be my guess. But also, I don't ask too many questions about that stuff because I don't want to seem like too overeager. Like, I'm just happy to be here. I can't control that anyway. So I just thankfully they invited me to the party. So I don't want to be annoying at the same time. But I think December start shooting. But who knows what COVID-19 And I've heard that
Right.
I was worried about it pushing other projects and those ones pushing, and then everything kind of falling down like dominoes and getting pushed out to the right. But I think it's on track to start filming in December and come out in 2021 sometime. That's but we'll see. And I'll also keep my expectations low, because in Hollywood things can derail at any time. But when we get off this podcast, it could have derailed already. You just never know. Keep those expectations very low, so that if it actually gets made, I'll be so pleasantly surprised. It'll be wonderful. And I look at it, a long commercial for the book is kind of how I look at it. Another piece of the puzzle, because I'm a writer. I'm not a screenwriter. I wrote a book, not a screenplay. But I'm always learning. And this is just another piece of that mosaic to help build that readership and bring more people into the fold that want to learn more about James Reese, my protagonist, and where he's going in the future. So for me, it was very important to have someone like Chris involved, because he's such a likable guy. And my character, it was important for him to be likable, because he was going to, especially in that first book, he was going to do things
pretty dark,
likable, that people might just turn him off. So he had to be someone you want to sit down and have a beer with, have coffee with, but then could flip the switch and just do the job, because he had that background, he has that training, he has that experience from Iraq and Afghanistan, he has that mindset, he has that education from reading things like the books behind me, to really get the job done and be creative, adapt, and just crush his enemy. So it's important that he's a likable guy, and Chris is a likable guy. And I thought kind of hey, this is someone that also needs to stretch a little bit, do something gritty, do something darker. He's at that stage of his career when I started writing this, that I thought that he was the guy that needs to do that, kind of like Tom Hanks in the 80s did all those comedies. And then he did Philadelphia, and he stretched, did something totally different. And from that point on, he could write his own ticket. One of the greatest actors of his generation. And so I thought of Chris the same way. So I'm super excited to see him, and he's going to dive right in. He loves all this stuff, loves getting into the tactics and working out and all that sort of thing. So he's gonna crush it. I'm fired up.
Yeah, man, he's such a good fit across the board for it. And he even played a SEAL in Zero Dark 30, right? He's one of the Team 6 guys.
Yeah.
When I look
back, post Parks and Rec. So he did a very small role, very, very small role in that film. So it was before he did Guardians of the Galaxy, before he did Jurassic Park, before he did Passengers. Is when I started thinking of him as the only guy to play James Reese.
Man, what a good fit. And coming on Amazon, right? It's going to be an Amazon stream series.
Yep. Awesome. It's like that series Bosch is. Michael Connelly writes that. Yeah, it's great.
Great story.
Great. Yeah, I think it's the last season is on right now, so that's next on our list to watch. But very cool. And again, I think it's a good fit, great network. But it's ironic that Amazon announces that it's going to be on their streaming service, and because I've just been on the Rogan podcast, like you were. Amazon's out of the terminal list. It's out of the book that they're now. So they make the announcement, and it's sold out of the terminal list. I'm like, come on, guys.
Well,
logistics.
I gotta say, you gotta thank Brother Joe, man, for when he gets behind our story, we're so blessed, because that's what happened to my books too. They sold out, and I knew yours would as well. I mean, for good reason. They're such great stories, but. Joe brought so much unity to the story, right? Left, right, conservative, liberal, whatever. He just brings us out into the mainstream. And that's what you're doing with your stories too, man. It's freaking incredible. And the coolest thing I think about Chris Pratt playing your protagonist in this incredible series of books is the conservation element, because there's so much of James Reese, i.e. you, going in there, being a hunter, that Chris is going to play, which he lives and resonates, which is going to be such a great message for the world when that thing blows up on Amazon. I can't wait to see this thing, brother. This is exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm fired up for it across the board.
Right.
It's gonna be great. But when I get up, actually, we had plans to get up to Montana, back up to Whitefish, to that ranch I was talking about before COVID-19 hit, to visit those friends that are up there. But no, those plans are kind of on hold. But I need to get up there and explore Montana a little more. There's so many friends I have in Bozeman, of course, with all the outdoor companies that have come in there over the last 15 years, friends in Hamilton, friends up in Helena, like just so many people that in Montana. I've only been up, I think, 3 or 4 times. Hunted there once. Once. Yeah.
Well, I'll put this out to you, and I put it out to Wayne as well. When you started talking about Whitefish and the Flathead Valley, that's my backyard, where I relocated to. And Granddad was career Navy. World War II, he was in Pearl Harbor when his cruiser almost got sunk, all that deal. And he settled up here on the edge of the Yak, knowing he'd come back and provide it for our family. And that's what we have out here. And spring bear hunting every night right now. I mean, not a soul around us for 10 miles. It's right up your alley, Wayne, yours too, like we've talked about. So when you make that jump, let's spend some time in the woods up here. It'd be great.
Yeah, no, definitely do that. That'd be amazing.
Sounds like some research.
Yeah, like that's exactly more research. It's all research.
Yep, it's all research, man.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that black bear I had this last year, I know I talked about it on the Rogan podcast, but I'm still just blown away by that, how good that was. Oh my gosh, just canned, and it was just amazing. It was everyone's favorite at one of the wild game parties that we had over here at the house. And it was everybody's favorite meat. And we had great stuff out there. I mean, I had elk out, I had moose out, I had whitetail out, I had axis deer from Lanai out. That's the other part. Yeah, so I'm a partner in a hunting operation in Lanai, Hawaii, for axis deer on sheep. Nice. Yeah, there's 4 of us out there. So it's a kind of a unique place to go hunt because you can bring the family and they stay in the 4 seasons. And, whichever spouse is the hunter can go out and bring in some great axis deer. And the Nobu that they have that's attached to the 4 seasons there, they do like almost like a carpaccio with axis deer. It's amazing.
Oh, yes.
So anyway, point being, we had axis deer out there, which is amazing. We had all this stuff, and people loved that black bear. That was everyone's favorite. It was so good.
Everybody thinks black bear is so nasty, and it's just preparation. We have smoky sausages made out of it, and the meat marinated real nice at a local
it's
spot
very
right
coarse.
down where I'm at. And
nice.
Wayne, the same thing, Jack. I was so turned off by actually harvesting one for the fear of what it was going to taste like for the family, right? And it's absolutely the opposite, like you said, if it's prepared right.
Yeah, and you are what you eat. It depends where that bear. If it's eating out of a dump, it tastes like a dump.
Yeah,
the ones that are feeding in the cherries and the beach. Guess what? They are the best eaten thing in the world.
Yeah, they're delicious.
I think ours was just pounding those blueberries or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I had a case.
I talk.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I had a case once where a guy didn't gut a bear, and that sends off bells in our heads when he doesn't gut it where he killed it, and he never had gutted a bear before. So I gutted it for him. I cut it open. The thing had been in the black cherries. It was the sweetest smelling thing I have ever. It was so aromatic when I was gutting it. I've never had that experience. It probably never will again. And I told him, I said, this is going to be the best eating bear. And just because he's been eating cherries for a long time. And when you gut the animal and it smells like cherries, I bet he's going to taste like cherries. So it was just small bear, very edible. But, for the game warden, I'm like, ding, ding, ding.
I thought you were going to tell him, oh, this isn't going to taste good. It's not good when this.
Take it home.
Like this. Let me take this for you. I'll take care of this for you. Yeah.
Yep. And one of the best hunting bow animals there is, to bow hunt a bear is just phenomenal. It's that. And I know, I understand you, Jack, you bow hunt, and it's so up close and personal. I've learned so much from bow hunting about hunting, and it's because you got to get close. And, and bears, boy.
True stalking. Yeah.
It's just, it's so awesome to bow hunt a bear.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. I've seen, of course, Cam Haines videos on it, and of course he goes up there to in Canada with Joe and sort of their podcasts up there. So I've been following along for years, and I'd love to get up there and do that. It's just it's incredible.
No doubt.
One thing, since this is the appropriate podcast to talk about it, I wanted to ask you guys 2 things. So part of that research I did to Mozambique when I got out there, it was not too long after the lion fiasco that we had a few years back. Don't even want to name it, but I got over there. And the PHs were like, they showed me these photos, and I have them of people all of a sudden just poisoning water holes because now those lions did not have any value after we banned importation of lions from Africa. And I forget if it was all of Africa, all lions, or just certain countries. I'm not sure. But regardless, where I was in Mozambique, you couldn't go there and bring a lion back. And so what do the people do? And why do they do it? Well, because there's no value. And that lion now is just killing their cattle, killing maybe their kids or their wife, because they are still living in villages and they're still walking down to rivers to get water, that sort of thing. And so they were just poisoned and had these pictures of these bloated lions. Obviously, it doesn't discriminate on just the older male lions who have been kicked out, the pride or whatever. There's just babies that are bloating there by the side of these watering holes. The mom's right there, that's just all bloating and getting nasty. And so, I have those pictures. I haven't posted them or done anything with them. Just kind of waiting for the appropriate venue, time, whatever. But,
sure.
We have these people in this country that are on their lattes in New York and LA and just kind of congratulating themselves on how many lions they saved by getting this ban pushed through because of what they could do with the media and how they could manipulate that story. Sure. And now, what they really did? They killed all those lions that I have pictures of, and obviously many, many more. That's what the real outcome of that was. That's what it led to, when it was based on emotion, not science, not even logic. Because these people are going home to their houses, and then they're getting the exterminator to come and kill the cockroaches if they see one in their apartment in New York. But then they're going down there to the coffee shop and talking about how horrible it is for these people over there or for people to go over there and hunt lions or whatever it is. But it's a tough one to talk about because we see the Lion King and they look so. You see them in the zoo behind bars. But what you really do by banning that, if you could show people, if you could take them to Africa and they could hang out and have a drink and share a meal with those trackers and those PHs and people from the village, and just talk about it as humans, they might say, oh, wait, your wife and your kid are separated from this lion by just a little bit of thatch, or a tarp or something. Oh, and they're going out there to the river to get water, right. and that same lion that could kill your wife and your kid or you is also killing what provides food for your family, money for your family, which is maybe some of your cattle or whatever that is. Oh wow! And so you're poisoning these water holes because of that. And I'm responsible for that because I supported this ban on hunting and bringing back those lions. So there's just a lot more to it than people think. People think it's just like cut and dry and what they see on the news. Oh, yay, we saved some lions because these evil Americans can't go over, these evil Europeans or whoever can't go over and hunt these things. Well, you know what you did? You killed a ton of lions.
Totally did. Yeah. And to that point, it's that emotional reaction versus a logical reaction on the conservation versus preservation debate. And, you and I coming from California, we saw a lot of that. And being a game warden in California, and Wayne and I have talked about this a lot with other game wardens on other podcasts, California was becoming so much less a consumptive conservation state when I was rotating out than it was more preservation state. And none of, the inner circle of conservationists, including agency game wardens and biologists, never wanted to see that and still don't. But to your point, Jack, it's spot on. If people were willing to actually see that and take a breath and realize that for that one lion that was hunted ethically, killed humanely, the money that was generated, right, for conservation, for that herd, all those African animals that feed villages for months, that need that meat, that keep the conservation balance and keep those species thriving. That's what the world really needs to see. And I don't think you can argue that logically if the animals are there and they're thriving and we're keeping a balance. Even if you're an anti-hunter, I would think you would want to just accept it and say, hey, it's not for me. But I understand if it's done humanely, if it's done legally, if it's done ethically, and it's regulated properly, we should support it in every country in the world, regardless of species, whether it's the big five, whether it's the, predator cat, grizzly, the brown bears on the islands, whatever. And Wayne, you have a different, I think you and I share the same mantra on that. Anything on that to add, but that's what we really got to push, and that's how our wildlife's going to thrive. And that's what we're doing here on the Thin Green Line. And just as being conservationists and you as well, it's super cool to put that message out.
And my question is how we reach those types of people that don't understand that symbiotic relationship that those tribes have with the wildlife as it provides for them. And when that is no longer in existence, they just kill the wildlife that you wanted to protect. And to get that message, whether it's some kind of video ad or something to show that type of thing, this is the result of this action. You had great intentions, but this is what it does. So let's look at the whole thing. And I think of the political, when we have our politicians get involved, usually our fish and game departments are protected and it's all science-based. But when our politicians get involved and start taking that authority away from fish and game departments to do their job on a biological level, that's when we get into trouble. That's when I start seeing that slippery slope. And we see these anti-groups come in and start attacking those types of legislation to push that stuff through. That's going to have the effect. It can have the same effect in the United States. You guys deal with cougars out there. I mean, just think when that population starts to rise, we start seeing human attacks. We start seeing domestic animal attacks, and we regulate it through hunting. And that's part of the conservation. How much do hunters put into the conservation money-wise? And how much do these anti-people that are always against it, that want to save these people, how much money do they put in? They don't put hardly anything in, compared to what the hunter does, the fisherman, the outdoorsman, and let's stop, let's stop hunting and fishing and see what happens. Everything would implode. And that's what we don't want to
circle back to that. Actually, I want to ask you guys that specific question, but first, even me as a hunter, as a conservationist, like I knew the science, I knew the logic behind it, as far as lions in Africa and that sort of thing. I knew what I supported. It was just natural. But then when I got over there, even though none of my views changed on any of that, it was just such a more visceral type of experience that pounded it home, because I'm sitting there, I'm sharing meals with these people who live there, who live it, and they're showing me photos. This is 3 days ago. This is this watering hole. Look at this mom. Look at these cubs. They're not cubs. They're dead. They're bloated, and they've been poisoned because they have banned bringing lions back into the United States. That is why. That is a direct result of people that really wanted to do good. Well, the direct result of trying to do good and save the lions are these dead ones that I'm looking at right now that are just a couple miles away from where I'm saving. I'm sharing this dinner, or sharing this meal of wild game, with these people. So it's different. And none of my views changed, but it was just such a different experience to go there and share that meal with people, see those photos that were taken a couple miles away from where we were eating that meal. It's different than just conceptualizing it back here and knowing logically how that all works.
It's an emotional reaction.
Yeah. It just drives it home. So I don't think that people sharing those lattes in New York and California that think they did a really good job and saved a bunch of lions. I don't think that, well, even if we were to explain that to them, I don't think it's going to hit home unless they go over there and sit down and walk that ground and talk to the people and really do that research. It's just, not everybody has the opportunity to do that, obviously, but I think that's really what drives it home. But what I want to talk to you, actually, I wanted to ask you guys about were the mountain lions in California. Out here, because I did my first mountain lion hunt this year, and I was amazed. I forget how many, because I asked, how many do you guys need to take out of here? I was asking questions like I always do. And I was shocked. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but I forget how large of an area we had to hunt. But I was shocked by how many they said needed to come out of there. And I might get these numbers wrong, but I was going to guess it was going to be like 5 or 6. And I think it was like 20 or something like that. It was like shocking to me how many more needed to come out of there to maintain that balance with the elk and deer and then and cattle and everything, people and all the rest of it around there. So that was fascinating to me. And, I've heard in California, just how many mountain lions do come out of there that's not really advertised because there needs to be that balance, or there's some in neighborhoods or whatever else. So I was curious what you guys saw as far as that goes. And in California, it's such a wonderful state, what an amazing state, what a great resource. But they just kind of jack everything up. But what you saw as far as mountain lions over there in California?
Yeah, that was probably until I went to the special operations side and we formed up the Met and all that stuff. That was probably my biggest challenge as a field lieutenant with a squad of about 7 wardens. And then for all of our lieutenants and all of our game wardens throughout the entire state, Southern California, the LA Basin, the Angeles National Forest, Jack, the San Bernardinos. And where I was born and raised in the Silicon Valley, we had 5 or 6, mountain lion calls a week. Wow. I personally had to dispatch 5 or 6 lions during my patrol days that were injured or under an RV sales trailer with people coming to work and, San Jose SWAT showing up, guys I know from training, holding a perimeter, like, what do we do now? And I'm in a position where now you have a public safety or an injured depredation animal that you have to dispatch, but they are protected in California, as you know. Management of the mountain lion was taken away from Fish and Wildlife as an agency back in '92, way back when I started my career in the academy. So it became a protected mammal. Very right, Wayne. And the general consensus right now is conservative estimate about 6,000 cats that are being unmanaged in California right now. And that's a lot of freaking cats, even for the big state of California, as you know. So those interactions are not stopping. They are ending up in people's yards. They're taking pets. We had 2 fatalities when I was still on patrol. I started in Riverside County, not too far from over the hill from where you were training.
Yeah.
And during that time, we had a female hiking group leader that was mauled to death, unfortunately. And then within a couple of years of that, we had a long distance runner female in El Dorado County also taken out by a cat. And those were the first fatalities we had in the new generation, if you will. But we've had, close to 20 fatalities, and management has not changed. But there's a big push from the conservation side to limit the hunting of them, limit the management of them, maybe do specialized hunts. I don't think the politics warrant that and ever will in California, the direction it continues to go.
Yeah.
But that's where we like to see it as conservationists. And then, like you going to Utah, we have a cat hunt up here as well in Montana. And as remote as it is here on the Yak side where I'm at, the most remote, smallest county in the whole state, right next to the Alberta border. And, it's hound hunting for them out here in the colder months. It is amazing to see how many lions these guys see in a denser area when you think they would be spread out in that 70 to 80, 90 square mile perimeter that they normally have as a mature lion. But in California, those perimeters and those territories are so compacted. We're just seeing them right on top of each other. It's incredible where many cats are getting taken on depredation or getting run over by cars. And what your point is, the 3 S's, shoot, shovel, and shut up, for some of the private ranchers we know that are having livestock taken and they're probably not reporting them. And, there's a legal issue there, but then there's a letter spirit of the law issue too of, livelihood, livestock, food source. There's that debate that just goes on and on. So there are a lot being self-managed, if you will, in the backcountry on private lands. We're certain, and we see that a lot. But one of the biggest challenges in California for sure.
Yeah, it's tough, man. California is such a beautiful state. It could be such
a
sportsman's paradise,
Yeah.
Still a few pockets here and there where you can, but man, it's just, it's sad. We love it out here in Utah. I'll tell you that. What a great state it is. And I know you're in a great spot in Montana, but yeah, if you're into Idaho, up into Montana, it's just what a great little pocket there. And of course, Alaska. I love going to Alaska.
I'm enchanted with Alaska.
Yeah.
Several hunts in the past and more coming up. So
nice.
Yeah, and Wayne's out in a great state over on the east there, where big populations of big game and really open to non-residents. So starting to do some stuff back on that East Coast too. Incredible out there.
Nice. Yep. Nice. Yeah. Alaska. I want to get back up there soon. I'd love to go to a, one international and then one Alaska, and then plus all our stuff that we have around here, whether it's Lanai going out there to have that operation, or it's lease that we have in Texas, or some friends' places in Texas, or Colorado, or here in our new home state of Utah. Got a great elk up here last year that's still feeding the family. We'll be feeding the family tonight.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hadn't even hunted Texas till last year, co-hosting a show for Gary Lewis, and we just did that first episode of that Thin Green Line show we've been going back and forth on, and it was one of my teammates, longtime hunter Mark, 20 years deep as a game warden. We trained up together. He came on after I did, one of my main snipers on the Met team. And he shot his first out-ad sheep, and I shot my second one during the episode that's about to drop, and I think you guys will dig it. But it was so crazy for me to see 55,000 acre ranch right bordering the unprotected stretch of the Mexican border with a cartel infested kind of corrupt town, getting into that particular ranch. But the biggest and nicest out-ad really anywhere in the country, and all the other wildlife, the desert mule deer, javelina, and just the vastness of that territory. I hadn't seen canyon country like that, guys, since the south rim of the Grand Canyon 10 years ago.
Nice.
And I didn't know Texas had that. And we had an amazing hunt. We got 2 big rams. Part of the show's content is the ethics of long range hunting, versus this big wave of all these long range hunting, shooting aficionados buying the new high tech weapons, buying the big, the rangefinders, the reticles, applied ballistic systems. But when do you really apply that ethically? How long of a shot should you take? How well trained and practiced are you? And this is where we compared the snipers in us as trained snipers that do shoot far, but we don't shoot animals any farther than we have to, versus when do you have to take a long shot that, we've always considered over 400 yards a long shot for an animal. And that ranch kind of made me a believer that there were situations where we could not get closer to 500, 600, 700 yards, just with canyon separation, thermals, predators coming in on the animals, and ended up taking 2 rams 30 seconds apart at 707 yards, clean, humane, wow. Good ballistics, something to share with a buddy, that you've hunted with forever, Jack. You've been in battle with them. You shared your first hunts in certain parts of California together, and got into all those debates. But it was just so interesting to see what Texas had, is my ultimate point, and how threatened it is by some of that border cartel issue that we address in the show, as well as the thin green line. Things that you've talked a little bit about in your books and things you've talked about with other podcast hosts of what are we looking forward to? And it's a good segue if you got a minute to give your input on what are our next threats. I mean, obviously COVID-19 was a heck of a wake up call, but we certainly could have had a worse pandemic with a worse biohazard, let's say. And then the other threats we have around the globe, you hear Joe Rogan and our buddy Ed Calderon, who's also on this show, an expert on the cartel side south of the border. And I do some stuff on the north side of the border, and we have that threat, but we got China now, and we know what that means. And not everyone's really talking about it, but where do you sit on all that? If you could give some of your input, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah. So there's a lot out there, obviously. Hopefully what we're doing now is taking these lessons learned at a strategic level, meaning the higher governmental level, at the operational level with states and then down to local communities. And then at what I call the tactical level with families and neighborhoods, essentially. So hopefully we're taking these lessons and can apply them to whatever comes our way, whether it's another pandemic, whether it's it's an earthquake, whether it's a tsunami, whether it's a hurricane, whatever that is, that's the enemy's learning from this. That's the
right.
He is looking at how we've responded to COVID-19, and there's incorporating how we've responded into their future battle plans. That's what the enemy does. That's what we do when we look at the enemy. But some of these people in these countries, like Russia, like China, we all know that they think long term. We've all heard that. We're thinking in 2 to 4 year cycles of elections, and they're thinking centuries. But because of that way of thinking, and because there's not that turnover that we have here, they can incorporate that into future battle plans. They can wait. They can be patient. So it's not like they see how we did something here with COVID-19. Oh, then the next year they're gonna attack, and they're gonna take advantage of maybe a lesson we didn't learn,
right.
that they noted. No, they can take that breath. They can let all this play out, and they can store that away, incorporate that into battle plans, incorporate that into some of the war games that they undoubtedly conduct. And some of that, of course, has to do with information. They are building and have built, acres and acres and acres and acres, miles, essentially, of hard drive out in China. We do the same thing here in certain places, and it's collecting data. It's collecting personal data. It's not just there targeting military people or government officials. It's collecting personal data from everyone. Every time we click that accept, and I do it too, because of convenience. We want to share a picture here or there, we put our credit card number in for this or that or whatever. All that stuff is being collected. And we'd be foolish to think that it's not. And then you have to think, how is that going to be incorporated? So imagine being here, being on lockdown because of, doesn't have to be a virus. It can be a natural disaster. It could be civil unrest. It could be a whole host of things, another terrorist attack, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, imagine now your credit cards aren't working. So now, not only can you not maybe even go to the store, but if there's something set up where you're ordering things to your house, now they're gone. Credit cards done. Identity theft. Throw that into the mix. So imagine just what we dealt with this pandemic, but imagine all your credit cards all of a sudden aren't working. And now you're calling the bank and nope, because everything has been manipulated by China, by Russia, by whatever it is. I mean, that is well within the realm of possibility. So now if you didn't have civil unrest, well, guess what you have now when no one's credit cards are working and they're locked down at home because of the aftermath of a pandemic, of a terrorist attack, of a natural disaster, or 2 or 3 of those things. And now all of a sudden you don't have access to your banking information. You don't have your access to your credit cards aren't working. So those types of things, the enemy's looking at all of that. It's not just looking at, okay, how many tanks do we have? How many tanks do they have? How many ships do we have? How many do they have? No, they're not looking at all that stuff. Even though they were gigantic countries, we're still looking at things asymmetrically. We're still looking to exploit gaps. They're looking to exploit gaps in our defenses. And for us, not being a prepared citizenry, which this has shown that most of us are not, they're going to exploit that, or at least they're going to incorporate that into what they can possibly use against us in the future. So that's something that I'm thinking about, and also a good fodder for a fictional thriller.
I was going to say, man, I see a lot of tones for the current events of the world right now being a heck of a book 4 or 5.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm not going to run out of things to talk about. That's for sure.
No doubt.
Well, I think you said it really well when you said this is just the beginning of the preparedness we need to have as individuals, as families, as a country, and it's far more comprehensive than a military threat necessarily, than force on force at this point. And that's something that we do on this podcast a lot, even in the early stages of developing it, is we're in COVID-19. What a great time to, learn our lessons and look at the mistakes we're not. And like you said, my notepad is 3 pages long of the stuff that I'm lacking in and the family's lacking in up here. And Wayne and I have had that talk with other prepper type, solid, credible guests. And your input is really valuable from your experience, and we appreciate that. But it sounds spot on and something we need to think about moving forward.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, the most important thing is for people to, one, take those notes like you did, like I did, but then for all of us to act on those when it's appropriate. Right. And so that's the most. You can have all the notes you want, but if you don't act on them, then it was pretty much useless. And for a lot of people, it's like, oh, geez, I had that rifle that my dad passed along to me, or I got that pistol years ago and I put it in the safe and then I haven't touched it since. Maybe we should get some training as a family, both so that, the rest of the family understands safety. And then maybe we understand how we can utilize that tool if we need to, because sometimes if I dial 911, the police are minutes away when seconds count is the old adage. And that didn't really change with this. It just brought awareness to that fact. So maybe it's time to go get some training with that firearm, not just for you, but for your family, and to go to a reputable place that can start you off at the crawl stage and then move you up to walk or whatever. Maybe you come back to learn how to run with it or whatever. But like going up to Thunder Ranch in Oregon, I love it out there. Or finding somebody that's coming through your hometown that travels around to local ranges, that's reputable and solid, has a great reputation, and is going to make you more effective and efficient in learning how to manipulate that firearm when you need to. So it's more than just taking those notes and recognizing it's then for people to act on it when appropriate, when they can get out of their houses again, but really make that a priority, prioritize their list and put that on it or whatever they've taken notes on, and take action.
Yeah. And each state offers hunter safety for free. Or now that some of it's online, there's a little charge, but for little money, people can learn about firearm safety, how to shoot, how to prep that thing, how to, put that all together that we've been doing for years. So here's an opportunity for somebody, if that's on their list, to go to the state and say, hey, I need hunter safety, whether it's online or in person. You're going to learn from that and take it to the next level from there. So I think that's pretty important. So thanks for all your input, Jack, because it's been phenomenal, and it's phenomenal to meet you, and I appreciate your books. Wrapping that, like John says, that segment in there that we can really attach to, because like I said, the more I listen to you, the more I'm like, he would have been a great game warden. So
yeah, no, I always think that would be one thing I would have liked to have done. That's for sure. If I wasn't a SEAL, I would have gone that direction. So what a cool thing you guys have done and do, and I sincerely appreciate it. My family appreciates it. So yeah, thank you for standing that thin green line.
Well, thanks, buddy, for being on, and we'll keep in touch. And anything you need on this end, you got, and we'll be moving forward and looking forward to good things coming from you.
Sounds great. No, looking forward to getting up and saying hello in Montana. So thank you, man. It was awesome talking to you. I'm glad we got to do this.
Right on, Jack. Stay safe.
Take care.